This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Weaver. I'm the VP of Sales at NSA. I'd like to thank everybody for joining our webinar for today's session. Today is session number 51 of our professional services webinar series on value add versus kitting. Seems to be a very popular topic. We've had a lot of folks sign up for this. I'd like to introduce Kira England. Kira has been with NSA for quite some time. She's done presentations at TUG, and she's also got significant experience in the order entry, warehouse operations, purchasing, etc. with Infor's products, both SXE and Cloud Suite. And we will today be taking questions in the Q&A box, so please go ahead and answer or submit your questions there. There'll be a couple of breaks during today's webinar for you to be able to go ahead and submit those questions. Everybody will be muted during the session today, so that will be the way to go ahead and make sure you get that information to us. We will be sending a recording of the session to everybody that's on the webinar within 48 hours following the session. If you do need to resize your screen, there are some controls to the right side, a plus and a minus, to be able to go ahead and do that. And with that, Kira, take it away.
Great. Hello. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm excited to present today's topic. I'm more excited I get to do this from our NSA platform, and I hope that all of you enjoy it and you get something out of this conversation. So we'll go ahead and get started. So value add versus kitting, I love the ultimate showdown because it typically tends to really wound up a conversation because people want to know really what the difference is and which way they should go with things. So we're going to talk about what these things are, what these modules are. We're going to talk about those differences today. I want to get around to that, what are the advantages, and really how to help you guys leverage what you have. So we're going to begin on the topic of kit production. And so over time, kit production is referred to as kits, kitting, bundling, sometimes work orders. So in general, what you're doing, you're going to be taking components, you're going to be taking products, you're going to combine it all together, group it all together, and you're going to give it a single part number. Now, there's a few ways to go about that, but we'll get to that part. Now, I have children who you may hear cackle in the background today. But if anyone has ever been involved with kids in any way, shape, or form, you have typically been given at some point in time a box full of things that you have to put together. Okay. And so the manufacturer or maybe distributor, however, bundled all of those individual parts together, sold you a part number. In our example for kit production, we're going to use trampoline as that part number. And in that box, you're going to have several poles, you're going to have springs, padding, netting, a million bolts. You're going to have several things. And so I'm going to take this simplified version here. I'm going to put all of that together and then the SXE CSD terminology. Okay. So you're going to take that product number trampoline. It needs to be set up in ICSP, our product setup. And there is an identifier there for kit. There's a whole wonderful section dedicated to kit. And so you have to choose one. Right, now we're going to get into a little more depth there on whether that's build on demand, pre-built tally. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But you have to choose one. That's how the system's going to know that this is to be treated as a kit item. Now, when it comes to component products, okay, those numbers, right now we're looking at pole, spring, padding, netting, and bolts. Those also obviously need to be set up in ICSP as well. There's no indicator inside of ICSP product setup that this is a component, because realistically, these products can be sold individually outside of the kit, and they're not dedicated solely to any particular kit. So now, how do we tell the system what the relationship is? How do we tell the system we want to sell a trampoline with these different products from my inventory, right? That is where KPSC, the kit component setup, comes in. It takes our product number, trampoline, connects or links those products to trampoline. And then when you add to kit trampoline, You can add things like components, which could be physical products or a labor product. That, those ICSP products set up, there's a status for labor, an actual labor product number. You get to play with things like options, right? So products that you can make optional, you can have substitute. So if one component's out of stock, you can substitute that with something else. And then if there's a group of products that could be in there, you can actually have a kit group set up inside of the kit. So it's a grouping of, maybe that bag of bolts also has washers in it. So you know exactly how many bolts, how many washers. You may use it in several kits. So a group of products. Now let's come back around to the different types of kits. Build on demand. You have pre-built and you have tallies. All right. Build on demand. Build on demand is going to give you order entry flexibility. So an order taker could accept the components as is. I'm an order entry taker. I type in trampoline. I just want whatever is in the box, whatever the system says. You could give them the ability to truly get in there and customize what is a part of the trampoline kit. For example, you want to make it special and have a wonderful basketball goal on your trampoline. You can have that item set up as optional. They could select that and make that a part of this kit that they're selling to this customer. You also have to understand the availability that they see through order entry can really depend on how you set it up, but the component availability. If all of the components are available, the kit will show available. And it'll give you a net available through order entry so you can see how many you can sell. So this customer needs 10 trampolines. They're being extra. They need 10 trampolines. But depending on how you've made up some settings in your KPSC that allows back orders, that could change. But that availability visible through order entry. Now, when it comes to reserving inventory, reserving components, to that kit, to that build on demand kit, that's delayed until that item is actually added, the trampoline is actually added to the order. It's not dedicated to trampoline. It can be a part of the trampoline process. And then you've got a cost price roll up. All right, now that is a setting that's inside of your product setup in ICSP that if you leave it blank, you're going to have to work on how you want the price to be set up for this particular trampoline and the cost of the trampoline. Now you have the options there to roll up price, which means you're going to roll up all the prices of the components to create the price for the trampoline. You could select cost, which would just roll up cost of the components to create the cost of your build on demand kit, or you could select both. And so cost and price would all roll up and give you your final price and cost for the trampoline. Now, build on demand, you're going to get a pick ticket that works as your work order. Okay, so there's not a separate document. An order entry pick ticket is going to contain your trampoline. It's going to list each of the components separately and show those components and what bin locations they're located in, because in this case, again, the components are separate. They can be in different bin locations, and these guys just go and pull to put this together. Components remain separate. Now, pre-built kits. Pre-built kits is what it is. A pre-built kit combines components prior to order entry, prior to the sale of the product. There's no customization like we saw previously on build on demand. No customization inside of the order entry side of things. So if you wanted that basketball goal, that's going to have to get pre-built before it gets put on the shelf to buy it, to sell it, right? Again, that's going to require a kitting process. That is through your KP Work Order Center. The availability of a pre-built kit solely depends on whether or not a pre-built process, the work order center process, has been completed. The reservation of inventory occurs through that KP work order process. It's, again, nothing to do with order entry. It's all done prior to. And then when it comes to cost and prices, cost is a given. Costs are going to roll up based on the components you put into it during the KP work order process. That will be the cost at the end of the process. And then pricing is the one option where you can either determine what the price is going to be, or you allow it to roll up price. Now, that whole work order center, that is a creation of a work order. Go back one. You create a work order that can be done manually, that can be done through a sourcing process through order entry, or it can actually be done with a replenishment report. Once that work order is created, you can customize it. Like I said, add the basketball goal if you want to, right? You've made that goal optional in KPSC. Inside of the work order center, you can actually see how many you have available to build, right? Based on components, based on what you have, all the settings you have in KPSC, boom, you have this many that you could build if you wanted to see. Then you have your recommended replenishment action report, which is very simplistic. Look at min maxes, you can go out there and see what's needed, look at what you have, some of the settings in ICSW, review to see how many you need to build. Now, when it comes to tally is a different kind of kit altogether. All right. A tally is a group of random length lumber products that have the same width, thickness, but random lengths. Okay. Typically, your building materials industry is going to use tallies to group lumber products together as like a single unit instead of having to handle each individual component. There's 3 types of tallies. You've got a specified dimensional, random dimensional, and a memo tally. Okay, and each one has very specifics. For example, your memo tallies, they're only concerned with the total number of linear feet without regard to the lengths or quantities all in that mix. Okay. Are there any questions lingering around kits at the moment?
Yeah, so folks, for those especially that have joined late, I'm going to ask that you submit your questions into the chat button, which is up top, and we'll wait a couple minutes and see if we get any. And Kira, I do have one question that came in for kits specifically. So for build on demand kits, can some components be set as required and others be set as optional?
Yes, you can require some products, that way they don't get taken off. And then others can be optional. For sure, you can mix that bag.
Okay, great. And we'll just wait a couple more seconds here, see if we get anything else. It looks like we're good to go. Why don't we continue on?
Okay. Good deal. So then let's jump into the value add module. And what you're doing here is you're going to take the basics of what you just saw on the kit production pre-built kits, and then we're going to beef that up a little bit. So you're still combining products, right? You're still taking those stock products, maybe even non-stock products, combining some labor into that. But this time we're going to add steps to the process, basically laying things out for the operator to know in what steps what is happening. Again, guys, I have kids, so that's where my brain goes. We're going to be building a go-kart for this example. So ideally, you're still going to need components, right? You need a go-kart frame. You're going to need motor, steering wheel, tires. I've simplified that immensely, but those are what we're going to work with. Now, with those components, things need to happen. And in VA, instead of just saying from kit pre-built, you just have a list of components. In value add, you go from part number to sections, sequences. And in this one, we're going to have to paint some things. We're going to have to mount things. We're going to have an inspection process because we want this thing to work just fine. So now that we know that we have an item we want to build, we have components, we know what processes need to happen, how does that translate into SXE or CSD? So for that top product, right, the end product for this one, we're going to actually have a product set up, Go-Kart 50cc in pink, set up in ICSP. There is no value add indicator in ICSP. It is a part number you sell. Now there is a selection there for value add assembly type. We're going to come back around to that a little bit later. But for now, we're going to keep it simple to get the basics. You're going to need component products. All right, we're going to need component setup and product setup ICSP, right? I feel like I'm on a bit of a repeating habit here. It's got to be an ICSP for things to work. Now, there's also labor products set up in ICSP. There's no value add indicator though. Obviously, you need to have the status set to labor. Want to make sure that's kind of a requirement here when we get into some of these sections, these sequences for labor specific sequences. And then sections. I've said that word a few times. That is, they're built in your SASTT system tables. There are several, like value add internal, VA internal, VA externals. There's several in there that you want to see through the process, which one makes most sense for your business. And then after you've determined all of that, you have something you could do. And I say that because it is optional. It's not a requirement. VASP, product defaults. So previously we were talking about kit production. KPSC is where you set up all and you define all the components, define all the labor products that go into it. VASP is taking that, but for value add. Now you're going to take it, create it for product Go-Kart 50cc pink. You're going to build in what sections or sequences need to happen, right? We've got to pull inventory components. We're going to end up having an inspection of the frame. We got it in from a different vendor. We want to make sure we're good to go. We've got painting that needs to go out. So we're going to set up the different things that need to happen and when they need to happen, right? Then you're going to have to add in all your component products, what needs to be pulled, how many. Labor, we're going to get a little bit more in depth here on labor rates. But keep in mind your VASP record is actually specific by warehouse. So ICSD warehouse ID, if you have 5 warehouses doing it the same way, you're going to need to set up 5 VASP records for defaults if you want to have defaults on every time a VA order is created. But why do they make it that way? Because things could be different by warehouse, right? Vendors may be different if you're doing external labor. Right, you may not, these 5 warehouses could be spread across the country. They're using different vendors to get paint work done. Whereas maybe one warehouse can actually handle some of that paint labor internally and others cannot. Labor rates can be different by location. So there's different variables as to why that's capable, why we have those defaults for each warehouse. But as I mentioned at the beginning of that, this is optional. You don't have to have these defaults set up, but it can save you time, which is crucial when you're trying to build these out. And you can have them simple or you can have them as 10 steps long, depending on really how much you want to do right there every time you create a VA order. Now, looking at the value add order process in general, it starts with the value add order. So value add order entry, got to create it. You're going to have some pick tickets, right? You have components, you need to pull them. You need a pick ticket to go do that. You have what's called an internal document. People call it a work order, not to be confused with the KP work order. It's a different document, but it is an internal document that kind of lays out steps for you. You have labor entry. We're going to get into more detail about that in a little bit. Value add shipping. You've got components that need to be finalized and consumed inside of this process. You may physically actually need to ship something. So there's a shipping feedback process. And then there's value add receiving, which is taking all of this great stuff that you've just done, wrap it all up, finish it put it in your inventory or finalize the VA process. Now, this looks like a lot of steps. I get it. You can make these processes as simple or as complex as you need them, whatever the requirement is. So let's talk about the value add order creation. That's done through VAET, value add order entry, if you want to create it manually, which means every time you need to create a go-kart, you come through here and you create, and you basically select new, create a new VA order. You could source it directly through order entry. So if your order entry folks are very familiar with your process, then you know they could source it value add through whichever warehouse, right? Or use your value add recommended replenishment report. Very similar calculation done like your KP report. So you're looking at min maxes, ICSW setup, what's on back order, those kinds of things. And it can either report to you how many the system feels you need to create, or if you let it actually create the value add order for you. Now, because we created a VA order, I want to make sure we know when components are reserved to things. That reservation of components of inventory is done once the VA order is created. Now, when it comes to the documents, which things like that would be pick tickets in that internal document, there's going to be a pick ticket for every inventory component section. So depending on how you set up your value add defaults or how you've created your VA order, you're going to get inventory component sections. You need components, right? There's a pick ticket that can get printed for each one of those. And then you have your internal document. All right. This is laying out what labor needs, right? What needs to happen here. Now, the VA labor side of things. You can approach labor a few different ways. Estimated, actual, or a combination. Now, the labor we're discussing for this specific part is internal labor. Okay, that's labor that your team is doing through the process. If you set the labor on one of your sequences to estimated, the system is going to be looking for the entry of actual labor. So if you estimate and you put it in there as it's 1 hour, that's the estimate. When you guys are going through the process, depending on how you decide to do it, there's going to be a warning if that actual labor was never entered. The system's expecting you or a operator of some sort to go in and say it actually took 45 minutes. Okay, it actually took that long to complete the task, and then therefore completing the internal section. Now, when that time is entered and it updates, there is a calculation made between time and labor cost. This cost is what's going to be used and rolled up into the cost of the finished product. Not whatever was in estimated, whatever was added through actual. Okay. Now, if you set the labor on one of your sequences to actual, system's not looking for anything. That's the number it's going to use. And then I have combination listed on here because by no means do each one of your internal sections have to be set to estimated or all actual. You can mix the two. It's completely your choice. Now, this value add shipping process. This is completing the inventory component section. So you may have heard when I was talking about labor to complete the internal section. There are completion steps. Steps 1's completed. Step 2 is completed. Inventory component section needs to be completed. How do you do that? It's not a checkbox. It's through the value add shipping feedback process. And that's going to fully commit inventory into the VA process. It moves the value of your inventory from an inventory GL account, moves it into a WIP, work in process GL account. It works like shipping an order or transfer would, meaning it could ship to a vendor that needs to do some painting. It may need to ship to a different warehouse because they have a process that they need to do. Now, something I did want to point out while we're in it are dates. value add orders do have dates. And the first one that kind of comes up is an estimated completion date. This can get calculated from the number of days to fabricate, which is a number that you apply to that VASP product default record. And it'll calculate that for you. So whatever today's date is plus 10 days or plus 45 days to get an estimate. If the promise date of your VA order is left blank, the estimated completion date in that estimated completion date field is going to actually display an ICIA, so your product availability, as the next future date. All right. So if you need that date, next future date, to display something not estimated completion date, then you're going to need to fill in your promise date. You do get a requested ship date. So especially when you have sales folks that are interested in the process, you may be getting several emails. Sometimes you can use these dates then, requested ship date. All right, fine. And then, of course, back to that promise date and seeing that in ICIA to help folks too. Now, value add receiving, what does all that mean? It is a process, like I said earlier, a process of combining all the costs of the inventory components, the cost of actual labor, into a single value that would become the cost of the finished product. This part's crucial, otherwise it never hits your inventory. It's also crucial because it pulls out all of those values that were put into that WIP, general ledger account, puts it all together in a finished product, and then puts it into inventory to fill the order, the customer's order. Now, we kind of talked about it earlier, so coming back around to that, value add assembly type. That is something you're going to see in ICSP when you're setting up the go kart, right? There was an option in there for a value add assembly type. Now, this would take me much longer than 45 minutes to get through to teach you each one of these, but I didn't want to leave it off because you probably see that box and wonder, well, the girl never said anything. Configurable, that is variable components. You've got preset, which uses used with components of variable lengths. And then there's CPQ configurable, and that's actually working with Infor CPQ Enterprise Configurator, things that we would need to dive deeply into on a separate date, but all very interesting, very, very cool things. Did anybody have any questions on the value add portion?
Okay, folks, so once again, if you don't mind, if you do have questions, please enter it into the chat, and we'll wait a couple of moments here to see if we get any. And Kira, I actually have a question on VA. So is there any scheduling tool available for value add or kit production?
For kit production, no. For value add, there is something called production scheduling for the CSD world. It's in its basic level, but it's there being built on. So there's a possibility there for that module.
Okay, great, thank you. And then also, are there pick tickets and work orders customizable for either value add or kit production?
For value add, for sure. Now it kind of depends on which forms creator you're using, which environment you're in, your SXE versus CSD. The things that are not customizable, though, so pick tickets, yes, but those work orders, KP work order or the VA internal document, those are Infor produced documents. Those are not things we get to easily grab and customize. There may be some custom ways to do that. They're outside of the system, but not native to it.
Okay, great. There's a couple of good questions there. I don't see any others at the moment, so we'll continue on.
Okay. Now here comes the fun part, is actually getting to see some of the stuff, the comparison part of it, side by side. So remember, our kit production's trampoline, value adds our go-kart, right? When it comes to that order entry interaction, right? So on the KP stuff on the left, VA on the right. The KP side, build on demand, allows customization to the kit from within order entry. There is no way the value add's giving order entry folks any way to manipulate the value add order. Okay. When it comes to component sourcing, yeah, you can do that with build on demand component sourcing. The pre-built has to be done through the KP work order. And then component sourcing can happen inside of the VA order process. Now, cost and prices. We talked about cost price roll up. Build on demand, you can either do both, cost only, price only, or blank, where you would end up defining all of that. And then pre-built standardly is going to do cost on its own, and you optionally can do price. Now with value add, price setup is in ICSW, or you're using some of the pricing records. The cost of the item is determined through the VA order process and what costs are built into that. And then when you do that VA receiving, then therefore landed into your inventory with that cost. From a general ledger perspective, kit production is just using that one inventory control account transactions only, whereas you're getting that WIP account for value add. Work orders, which when I say work orders, I'm talking about the document that gets printed off that someone's using. Your kits, your build on demand kits, remember, are using the order pick ticket for that. And then your pre-built kits are actually using a work order created through kit production work order processing. From the value add side of things, you do have that internal document, which is showing you the steps. Your pick ticket is just for pulling components. So they're two separate places altogether. From labor for kits, that is a product that is added to the lineup of components. It's just another part number that's set up in there. So you may need to play around with how that is set up to get, it could be a flat rate of $50. So quantity one, it's your cost $50, you mark it up 75, whatever it is, or don't mark it up. Either way, it's a part number, quantity, cost. You do that calculation. Now, when it comes to value add, depending on how you add internal labor, it could be either estimated or actual. But then if you're doing external sections, which require external vendor labor, right? The vendor may give you a flat rate. Every time you send me something, it's a $200 bill per item I'm dealing with, right? So there's a little variable there, a little extra give there on the VA little options. Product setup for kits, ICSP is where it's at when it comes to defining an item as a kit. Value add, there's no indicator there. Basically, any part number in your system, minus labor products, could go through the value add process. No indicators anywhere. What's not on here, the ICSW. There is a field that people do tend to ask me about when it's in the replenishment side of things, that says Fab VA. It's not telling you that this item is a value add item. It's not produced by value add. It's telling you that it is replenished by value add. Okay. Speaking of replenishment, which is right here, you do have KPER, which is your kit production replenishment report. It's using min-max. There's no real buyer's control center. For those on the phone, those on the call today that are familiar with the buyer's control center, that is not a thing with kit production. It's not really a thing with value add either. You have the replenishment reports you can run that are really using min-max, but not a control center. Now, some stuff we didn't really get to talk about, but I want to make sure it's out there. There is versioning for KP pre-builts, and there's versioning for value add. So if you have the original way that you decided to build something, and then, well, we had to change something, you can change the original, or you can actually use versioning to use version 2. Okay. Are kits and value add, are they TWL friendly? Yes, you can do them. And then when it comes to cross warehouse processing, um, kit productions those are built in house. Now there is something that we didn't really get to talk about, which is transferable build on demand kits. That's a little different. It's not always questioned to me in a way that means cross warehouse processing, but it's doable with build on demands. And then value add, you can mix that bag up as much as you want to begin, depending on how simple or complex you make that work order. Kit production, value add, scheduling. Kit production doesn't have a true scheduling tool. And then you have value add, which they did come out with a production scheduling tool in CSD. Setting up defaults. Remember, KPSC has got all your setup defaults for components and options and groups, etc. And then you've got VASP to deal with value add product defaults. And then when it comes to different dates, right? Dates mean a lot to people trying to do research on what's going on. When it comes to kit production, you really get an entered date. Value add opens that up beyond entered date to give you estimated completion dates, requested ship dates, promised dates. KP stages, when you're talking about pre-builts, you do get to see the stages in that process. And sometimes that's very important for folks when they go and do research on the particular work order tied to their sales order. People doing the work, they want to go and see, where is this work order? Where is in the stage that it's in? All right, so you're getting ordered, you're getting printed, you're getting built, and then, well, canceled. Okay. Value add is going to not only give you stages at a header level for the order, so ordered, printed, received, closed, canceled. Each section has its own stage, depending on what section type that it is, depends on what the stage would look like. So you can see not only has it been printed, so some documents been printed, you can also see, well, this component section's completed, this painting process is completed, we're on to this step, right? We're on step 3 out of 10, whatever that might be. So guys, that kind of wraps up that part of the conversation. Were there any other questions, things that you would like for me to go back over a little more in depth?
Yeah, so we'll give it a minute here just to see if anybody has any final questions. For those of you that might want to talk about your specific requirements for either value add or kit production, you can contact NSA, either Kira directly, you can see her contact information on the screen, or at solutions@nsacom.com. And with that, I'd like to thank you, Kira, for your presentation today. I'd like to thank everybody that's attended today's session. Again, please look for your recording. You will be receiving that within the next 24 to 48 hours. And I do not see any final questions coming in. So with that, we'll go ahead and give it a wrap. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you, guys.
Bye now.
You too, Laura.